The nice guy mask is a manipulation. Men do have a lot of shadow forces inside them.
There's this rejection of anything in self that's assertive or domineering or anything that the world tells you that is masculine and bad.
Absolutely. That scares people. But we need those guys, that edgy part of us that is and needs to be capable of violence in the correct circumstances. If you don't have the capacity for violence, a woman's not going to trust you. Somebody comes into the home, breaks in, she wants to know that her man is willing to handle that. We've been shamed in that because that energy in the shadow has done so much damage in the world. So none of us want to identify with those parts of ourselves, but they exist in all of us. And it's not bad, it's good because it can set things straight.
So hello listeners, we're in for a treat today. We've got a man with us who I've been following for ages, it feels like, seeing his wonderfully put reels. I put his face very intensely looking at the camera. And before today, I just thought that he was really, really well polished with the reels. But now I've realized that this is, in his former profession, this is something he spent a lot of time looking into cameras. So today we have with us David Sutcliffe. How are you doing, David?
I'm doing great. Happy to be here.
Good to have you, man. Good to have you.
Yeah.
I thought we'd just dive in and go with a question that I guess, we're talking about emotional mastery today and maybe some other things. For you, is there a time in your life where your own emotional avoidance really came to the fore and you really realized that you had to shift something?
I think there were many moments. I guess the big moment for me, I'd started therapy in my mid-20s, just because I was curious about it. I was curious about psychology and this idea that there was things going on in our unconscious that we didn't know about, and they were controlling our decisions and our actions. I was like, what? There's something going on inside me I don't know about that's controlling me. I gotta figure that out. And I did, I did the normal deep dive with talk therapy, understanding what happened to me in my past and how that was impacting me in my future. But and not to say that I didn't get results from that, but there was something that was still stuck that I didn't really figure out until my mid-30s when I was in Hollywood. And a typical story, I had everything that I wanted. I had a TV show and movies coming out and a movie star girlfriend and a house in the hills, the whole thing. And, but I was kind of secretly miserable and I really couldn't figure out why. And I kept pushing it away. And I had some addiction issues, nothing serious, but I just kept going back. And then, my girlfriend, dumped me and it just rocked me for some reason. And my TV show got canceled shortly after that. And I kind of bottomed out. And, I realized that there was things I needed to confront about myself. There was something off. I wasn't living an authentic life. And I went up to this core energetics retreat at the Esalen Institute in Big Sur, California. A friend recommended it to me. And I'd done a little bit of core energetics work before, but this was a whole other thing, a week long with this woman who was apparently a master and turns out she was, and just got my mind blown, not only by the experience that I had, but the things that I saw. And essentially what happened to me is I came to a deep realization, and through an experience that I had, that I just was filled with fucking rage. And I hated women. I just wanted to annihilate women. And it was shocking because I had to, I was a nice guy. I was a typical nice guy. I thought I loved women. I love women. I'm really nice to women. I'm sensitive. I get them. That was the image that I had of myself. But underneath, there was this just anger and resentment and rage. And it all had to do with, things that happened to me when I was a child with my mother. And not that it was necessarily her fault. My mother was great, but my dad wasn't around and she was young. She was doing her best. But I didn't get what I needed. from her or from my father. So, I buried my needs and put on this false front for the world to see. And it made me a lot of money in Hollywood. I was the nice guy in all these TV shows. So that just completely rocked me. I couldn't believe the depth of the shadow that was inside me. And that really led me on the path to going deeper into this work. And of course, understanding that underneath that rage was a lot of pain and a lot of sorrow and a lot of grief for the things that I was, longing for as a child, but didn't get. And I understood at that moment the intensity and complexity of it. And it just became the only thing that I was concerned about. I mean, almost instantly, I didn't quit acting, but I was not nearly as interested because having found this very dynamic therapy and this particular therapist, that's all I wanted to do. I just wanted to get all the way into it. And I was just fascinated by by how she worked, by the work, just the modality in general, and the use of the techniques, the hitting, the punching, the kicking, all the somatic, bioenergetic elements to it. And then, the psychodramas. It just felt like, this is the way I can get to the heart of what I'm trying to get to.
And that's like big processes they are, right? The hitting, the punching, the rage, the loud music. I don't know how it's exactly done in that modality. And like the psychodrama, which is, putting people in certain places and acting out scenes. That's like big emotion to move through collectively, right? In the space. And you saying that, you were a nice guy, rage and the nice guy, that's like those two things that the nice guy doesn't want anything to do with rage because, he's not angry. He's not like those other fucking guys out there who do bad things. He's a nice guy. He's kind. His heart is so soft and gentle.
Exactly. It goes completely against the idealized self-image that the nice guy has, that underneath they're actually filled with rage and resentment, and that the nice guy mask is a manipulation. That they're doing it to surreptitiously get what they want. And so it's kind of controlling, which is why women are repelled by it. They may not be totally conscious, but they can feel something inauthentic in it. And so if there's something inauthentic, they're not going to trust it. They're not going to surrender. And that is the bind, I think, that the nice guys face. And it's pretty common. I mean, I think most guys have that image growing up in, the generation that I grew up in the last 20, 30 years. There's been this, I think at times I would use the word war on masculinity and shaming, and then added to that, just a lot, the more divorce becoming more normal and young boys growing up without their father around. Physically, and or emotionally, they tend to orient to the mother, to the woman, and then when they go out into the world, that's how they're oriented. It's like I have to provide or take care of the woman's feelings above my own, and that makes me good, and that's how I get what I want or what I need. And they kind of abandon their masculine authority, which is, I think, why so many women and men are unhappy in relationships right now.
Yeah, this abandonment of the masculinity, as you say, there's like this sense of war on masculinity. And, I think my understanding is I picked up a book a long time ago. What's it called? It's right here. Fire in the Belly by Sam Keen. I don't know if it's one you've read.
I've heard of it. I haven't read it.
Yeah, it's a good read because sometimes we think that this kind of questioning of masculinity is this new thing. It's never happened before, but this is written back in the 80s and it's been happening for, decades and decades. And it can feel like war. And I guess I wonder, why does it feel for us men often like masculinity, if there's like questioning, critique or anything like that, it feels like an attack, not just on masculinity, but on like who we are?
Well, because I think that men do have a lot of shadow forces inside them. I mean, the masculine shadow is control and tyranny. And we've seen that in the world. I mean, men can do a lot of damage when they're not conscious. So I'm very sympathetic on one level to the pushback from women and, things like the Me Too movement, because every woman I know has a story about some kind of sexual transgression that they've experienced from men, whether it's direct sexual abuse or just like constant, like men coming up to them in weird ways and putting pressure on them and shaming them. And so I understand that there's going to be a pushback, like that's loud and screaming and like, shut up, stop that. And that it turns into masculinity is bad. I understand the reaction. And so, but I think men are a lot more sensitive than people know, and maybe than they themselves know. I know I was a very sensitive young man, and I still am. And so I think that men get missed a lot, like they're not really understood by themselves, by women. And so there's a lot that gets projected onto them. And I don't think, because men haven't previously, they're starting to now really do the deep emotional work. They don't quite know how to respond to those attacks. They don't have the awareness or the language to express what it is they're feeling and what it is they need. And the fact that it hurts, like it's really painful. And so they just kind of override it. And then I think what happens is it gets internalized as shame. And there's really been no outlet for men to process that shame, because they're in this bind, like, you're bad. And then, which they're hearing from like feminism and in different factions of society. But then the alternative is like the Andrew Tate, like, uber macho, take control of everything, dominate life, which, I think you need men like Andrew Tate on the air. We've always had dudes like Andrew Tate, so they have to serve some evolutionary purpose. I don't judge that, but that's not most men. And most men can't get with that. They can't live up to that. So then they're stuck in this, and then they feel shame about that. Oh, I'm not enough of a man. And so either way, they get trapped. And so one of the things that I'm trying to do with men, and it sounds like what you're trying to do with men, is bring them back to their true selves, where they can have their masculine authority and their power and their aggression and their sexuality, but they can also have a soft heart and be tender and learn how to be present and loving and gentle, like a gentleman, a gentleman. And I think it's happening. I see it everywhere, and I'm happy to see it. But we're in this transition, I think, and all the confusion over gender roles. It's been a confused. Never before in history have we seen a time like we have in the last 50, 60 years, where men and women are working together in the workplace, and their salaries are equal, or sometimes women are even making more. And so then it's like, if you're a man, it's like, well, what am I? If I'm not providing, if I'm not protecting, what am I doing? Like, what's my gig? What's my role? And I think that leaves men feeling really confused and lost.
Mm. Yeah, we've seen massive social change over these last, like you said, 50, 60 years. And it's a bit like our technological change, isn't it? It's happened so quickly that our little brains haven't really caught up with like all this technological change. We've got we've got advanced computers in our hands all the time. We've been bombarded for our attention, plus a man's whole frame of who he's meant to be has started to shift quite drastically, especially in the Western world, right? If you go to kind of more developing countries, things are still a bit more fixed just due to the nature of providing and financial things. And men are just like stuck, lost, shameful. You touched upon feeling shame at being a man and being a masculine man. And like, I've seen how this, and I wonder what your take on this is, I've seen how that shifts men into this being of like, I need to reject anything that's kind of masculine because that's bad. Mm-hmm. So they reject their father. So some of us, it's easy for if your father wasn't really around because you're already kind of rejecting from being absent. But then there's this rejection of anything in self that's like assertive or that can be landed as maybe domineering or anything that the world tells you that is masculine and bad, and then rejecting that in ourselves.
Absolutely. Masculinity has been rejected and mostly within the self, right? It's been kind of deemed bad. I mean, I watch a lot of, or used to, but I still go back to them. I watch a lot of old Western movies, John Wayne and Gary Cooper, and I love those movies and I love those men. And there's a misconception about them. Like we hear, the mythology of John Wayne, and this image comes up about like this uber macho guy. But when you watch the movies, he's actually not always macho. He's quite sensitive. Man's got to do what a man's got to do. He's of service all the time. There's some problem that is happening in the town and they don't know how to solve it. There's these really cruel bad guys that are making trouble, and John Wayne comes in and he solves the problem. He is willing to take it on, and he has to access a part of himself that is dominant and aggressive and even violent to deal with the threat. And that scares people, that capacity. And so there's this tension in the movies of like, we want him to solve the problem, but we're also a little bit scared of him because the kind of man that can solve that problem is a little edgy. And, but we need those guys. And so I think that part of us, that edgy part of us that is and needs to be capable of violence in the correct circumstances. I mean, I always say, like, if you don't have the capacity for violence, if your killer is not present and you're not comfortable with it, a woman's not going to trust you. Somebody comes into the home, breaks in. She wants to know that her man is willing to handle that and has the capacity to use the force necessary to deal with it. And I think that we've been shamed in that because that energy in the shadow has done so much damage in the world. So it's about integrating that part of ourselves, not necessarily identifying with it, not romanticizing it. But just understanding that that's a necessary part of us, and that our work is to understand it, make contact with it, make peace with it, make friends with it, so that it's not coming out in distorted ways, sideways, that it's only used when necessary. And so, the sort of the holistic man, the integrated man, right? I think that's what we're trying to achieve. But again, understandably, it's been disowned, right? We've rejected it and made it bad. And it's not bad. It can be. But in and of itself, there's nothing wrong with it. In fact, it's good because it can set things straight.
Yeah, it's like the revealing. There's so many men have these parts of them that are rejected. They've rejected, the killer, the lustful man, like whatever it is. They've had these parts of themselves, but they want to be accepted by society in the world. They read the news. They're sensitive men. So they're like, well, those are all the bits that the news is telling me. The newspapers are telling me are bad. Like, so I'm better tuck all those things away, tuck them in my back pocket and hope that they never come out in any way, and move through the world as being nice and being gentle. And they have no capacity to reveal, like the killer, like bringing that 5% in the bedroom in a way that's consensual and deeply aware, that can be really beautiful, felt by yourself and your partner, or, that part of you that wants to feel being a killer, a bit like a boxer, for instance, or Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. Everyone seems to be doing Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu right now.
Yeah. It works.
To kind of bring that out. Yeah, I haven't tried it yet. But it's like allowing ourselves to feel that part of ourselves, to reclaim some of the power that we can bring into our everyday life and our relationships. And that's how I see as this, like the beauty of this revealing, that we're bringing more and more in to like de-shame these parts of ourselves.
Yeah, I totally agree. It's all about shame at the end of the day. I mean, I've been working with men for a long time and with women too. And really at the root of everything is just shame. Like we feel shame about different aspects of ourselves. And for good reason. They got shamed directly or indirectly, or we had to disassociate or repress certain parts of ourselves in order to feel safe, growing up. Maybe it was I was too much for mom, or I saw dad act out from that place, and I saw the impact that it had, and I don't want to be like that, so I'm going to reject that part of myself, and it gets shamed. And I think what happens is exactly what you said. When we have parts of ourselves in the shadow, repressed and shamed, it almost inevitably comes out sideways or indirect. And we end up doing more damage because of that. And it's not an easy thing for anybody to really understand, because we deny ourselves there because our intentions weren't that, right? And then we rationalize. And so, yeah, we have to, the work that I do is essentially that. It's inviting back all of the lost, repressed parts of ourselves in a safe environment. And sometimes when that energy has been repressed for such a long period of time, when it first comes out, it can be out of control naturally. If you've repressed your anger for a lifetime, when it first starts coming out, it's going to be scary. It's going to feel wrong. And so it may have some unconscious place where, because it's been repressed for so long, it's the anger is angry, if you know what I mean. And so it almost wants to get revenge, to punish, that it's been held back for so long. So you have to go through these layers and take ownership of them. And I think what happens is guys get scared of that. Like they get scared of the part of them that really can be destructive, that wants to be destructive, that has an intention to hurt, that can be cruel. And none of us want to identify with those parts of ourselves, understandably so. But they exist in all of us. And so a big part of what I'm trying to do with men is create a safe space for those parts themselves to come through, so they can see what it actually is that it's a defense against their pain, right? It's not them, it's their defense. And once they see that and they can create some separation, they stop identifying with it. It's from that place that they can begin to integrate it, if that makes sense.
Yeah. It's like over-identifying with our anger, for instance, where we go, I am an angry person, right?
Right.
Instead of saying, I'm just a dude who experiences anger. And, we all, and then when that sentence is said, it's like, it's really interesting, as I said that, is the difference in how that's received if we said that to people in a room. Like, oh, I'm an angry person, people want to back away from you. But if you say, I'm someone who sometimes experiences anger, people will be like, well, so do I. I'm like you. I'm a human being, and I feel angry sometimes.
Yeah. And anger is sometimes it's an appropriate emotion. If, like I said, somebody just coming into your house, anger is an appropriate response to that. If your boundaries are continually being violated, anger sometimes is an appropriate response. There's an appropriate kind of self-affirming anger, which is different than the kind of anger that is reflexive or reactive and really protecting our pain. So, we don't want to throw the baby out with the bathwater. I want to have access to my anger. Sometimes I'm in a fight with my wife, and sometimes I get angry. Sometimes it's appropriate. And by the way, sometimes her anger towards me is completely legitimate. And sometimes that energy has to be sort of expressed and cleared. Again, not in a destructive way, not in a blaming, judgy way, but we want to be self-responsible. But like anger in and of itself is not necessarily negative. It's just an energy. It's just emotion.
And we were talking about shame before, and I always think of, is it David R. Hawkins? He's got his levels of emotion, and shame being that one like at the bottom, like tar. And it's the one that's like least, has like the least energy to it, because it's just heavy. It calls us to hide. It calls us to run away. And I know David Glover, Robert Glover, talks a lot about, I was calling everyone David today. It's very strange.
Two Davids.
Yeah. Rarely happens to me this. I sit down with another David. Robert Glover talks about toxic shame, where it's like you talked about this before, it's like I feel shame, then I feel shame for the fact that I feel shame. And I'm just like cycling in this endless stuckness of shame. And I guess the question I have for you is like, how does a man start to lift himself out of that?
It's a great question. I think it starts by understanding the root of that shame. And, I alluded to it earlier. As children, we're vulnerable and helpless. And so our primary survival strategy is to stay in connection and in favor with our caregivers, obviously. And so any part of ourself that threatens the connection to our caregivers, we're going to repress, we're going to deny, we're going to disown. And we're going to conclude, understandably from the child's point of view, that part of us is bad. It's shameful because the child they don't really have a conscious mind to bring context to a situation like the way an adult can. So they're sort of narcissistic. So everything that's happening in their environment is really about them. If my dad leaves, it must have been something that I've done because I can't really comprehend that my parents are not getting along and it's just dad leaves. That's painful. I'm confused. I'm scared. It must be about me. And that really is that false conclusion that the child draws is really the origin of shame. And it happens unconsciously. And so when we become adults, we don't really even know that it's there. It just makes itself manifest in our lives and creates problems for ourselves, mostly in that we're unable to assert ourselves fully. We're unable to express ourselves fully because we're hiding something about ourselves. And sometimes we don't even know that we're hiding. And so we have to really understand how those false conclusions by the child became internalized. And in my paradigm, it's like to try to create a space where guys can express those parts of themselves and see that they're not actually shameful, that there's nothing really wrong with them. And so again, I start so many of my sessions with people when I start working with them, it's just like there's nothing wrong with you. You have a belief that there's something wrong with you, but there's actually nothing wrong with you. You just have an operating system that helped you survive childhood. It was necessary. It was the only thing you could have done. But that operating system is not serving you anymore. And so we have to kind of undo that system and give you new strategies. Now that's not an easy thing to do because of course we're identified with that operating system. It feels like who we are. It's all we know. And so getting out of it takes a little time and patience. But, the thing that I'm always teaching is we have to be willing to hold on to our inherent goodness, that we have to trust and believe that at our core, we are good and we are divine. And everything on top of that is a distortion, is the defense. So don't identify with the defense, identify with the essence of yourself. And if you ask any man, what's at their essence, like truly at their essence, their light, it's all good qualities. Well, I'm loving, I'm sensitive, I'm powerful, I'm creative. But so often we identify with the negative aspects of ourselves, which perpetuates the shame, which continues to keep us safe from the child's point of view. So in that sense, shame actually, it has a purpose, right? Like like when you think about shame, how does it make you feel? Well, it makes you contract, right? Like literally, like when you feel shame, your body contracts a little bit, and contraction is safety. Like if I'm contracted, I'm protected. And so again, all of that was learned as a child. So you need to teach people, help them understand that that's what's going on, and then encourage them to take the risks they need to take to express themselves in more direct ways that may initially feel wrong, but they'll soon start to see that actually, no, that part of you it's a good part of you. There's nothing wrong with your aggression, your sexual desire, saying no, having your boundary, whatever it may, going after what you want in a forceful way. these are good parts of you and you need to reclaim them to make yourself whole.
Mm. Mm. And it's interesting though, you say that like for this kind of self-expression and asking for boundaries and saying things we want, because I feel often there's a kind of societal narrative of men that, you know, they go for what they want, they're doing the things they want, they have everything they want. And then like yourself, you come up against the kind of truth of the men in front of you who hold this shame and they don't feel self-expressed. They don't feel they can hold their boundaries. They don't feel like they can really be themselves. And yet there's also a lack of kind of empathy and compassion for men's struggles around shame or emotional literacy and self-expression. And I'd love to get your take on this. Something I've been thinking about for a few weeks is this kind of empathy gap when it comes to men. Like there's a lack of empathy kind of shown to men.
Yeah.
So that gets translated down to boys. So boys learn there's a lack of empathy towards them from a young age. Like, don't cry. If you hurt your knee, you'll be fine. Like, it's okay. There's nothing wrong with you. So we internalize this lack of empathy because that's the only empathy we learn, the lower level of empathy.
That's
and then
right.
we then live through that through our lives into adulthood. And then we project that out, having a lack of empathy for others. And it just becomes this kind of cycle because girls get taught not to have much empathy for boys because they're tough. They'll be fine. They don't have emotions and feelings. Girls grow up into women being adult women, and it's like, well, you don't need to have empathy for men because they don't have emotion. They don't really feel. You can be, you know, and we're just stuck in this cycle.
It's amazing to me how many women actually believe like that men don't have feelings. Like they sort of, I know have men have feelings, but like not like we have feelings. And it's like, no, that's not correct at all. Men are extremely sensitive. But again, this is what women learned. And it's also, as you said, it's what men learned. So, it's a thing that I always say to my clients, I'm like, I don't feel seen. And I'm like, okay, but are you showing yourself? Because if you don't show yourself, then you're never going to be seen. And so part of it is men's responsibility. Like we have to be willing to show our vulnerability, to show women that we do have feelings, that we do get hurt, that we're scared of them. I mean, women are fucking scary. And especially, because when we were little children, the first relationship we had with a woman was our mother, and she was bigger than us. And, maybe she screamed and yelled at us. But we were desperate for her love and attention. So that, and if we don't have a father demonstrating appropriate masculine, feminine dynamics, if that's not modeled for us, we're going to go out into the world afraid of women. And so I think women have a lot of distortions around men. I mean, when I was, really started paying attention to the feminist movement and trying to understand it in the 2000s, or 2010, I think I really started, what the fuck is going on here? And I would hear the things it would say about men. I'm like, that is not fucking true at all. Like you have a completely distorted view of who men are. And so I agree with you. There is a massive empathy gap. And I think it's real. You can take it even further that like on a evolutionary biological level, men are essentially disposable. It's women and children first. I mean, that's what I got. And not that that's wrong. Of course, I'm going to sacrifice myself for a woman. That's just it feels built into me. Maybe not any woman, but certainly my wife. But, given the circumstances, it probably would be any woman, because I know on some level, like that's the way it's supposed to be. And I think what's happened is, in generations past, we honored that sacrifice that men made. And, whether you were a warrior or a policeman, like we understood that there was men that were doing the dirty work of society, and they were putting their lives on the line for the whole. They were making that sacrifice. And it just seems to me in the last 20 or 30 years that sacrifice has been dismissed or derided or made unimportant. And so I think men are left feeling, well, then why should I fucking do anything? Like if I'm not going to be appreciated for the sacrifice that I make, then I'm not going to make the sacrifice. And so I think there's a lot, that empathy gap has created a lot of resentment in men, and they've withdrawn because of it. And we see that everywhere in the incel movement and the guys who are refusing to get married and the red pill movement, which, there's some information in the red pill movement that's important to understand. But underneath it, what I see is just a lot of anger and resentment at women, which is not going to help. So it's a tricky thing. And I guess the other thing, David, that I would say is that I think I don't think women are ever going to see men perfectly. I just don't think it's a thing. I don't even know if they want to. And I think that's also true of us. Am I ever going to see my wife perfectly? Well, I can't, because I'm not a woman and I don't know what it's like to be a woman. So it's like, stop trying to understand her. Just love her. Just love this mystery, emotional, feminine, sometimes feels completely insane and irrational from my point of view. But can I just love that? That's really the most important thing. I don't need to understand. And I think similarly, I think women are on a journey of some women anyway, which I'm happy to see, of realizing they don't quite understand men, but they don't need to understand men. They just need to love them. And then it's really incumbent on men to get together with other men, without women around, and to process their emotions, to talk about this stuff, to liberate themselves from their shame, to talk about their frustrations and challenges with women, and not necessarily bring that to their woman. Like, we don't need to talk to them about everything. We don't need to share everything with them, that there's something sacred about the container that men create for themselves. And from that place, they can go back into the world, back to their woman, and feel strong.
And for a lot of men, that what you said there is, being in a group of men and sharing and being sharpened by, that's like quite a scary thought, because of their own experiences with men.
Yeah, men are scary. I'm scared of them sometimes. Men, especially again, in my situation, I grew up without a father around. And so there was really nobody there to protect me. It was just my mom. And then, as I said, about, on some level, I internalized that my father leaving was a rejection of me. So there's my first relationship with a man. I'm rejected, right? I'm not loved. I must not be enough. And I even feel the vestiges of that today in my relationships with men. That there's this deep-seated fear that I'm not enough, that I'm not going to be able to man up, and that I'll ultimately be rejected by the man. And so I think a lot of men have that fear. And so when you walk into a men's group, it's one of the first things I ask people is like, how does it feel to be here with a group of men? And, often it's like, feels great, blah, blah, blah. But then you go a little bit deeper and guys are like, no, actually, I'm scared. Like, I'm scared that I'm not going to measure up. I'm scared I'm going to do something wrong. I'm scared I'm going to get attacked. I'm scared I'm going to get physically hurt, especially if you had a situation as a child where you were bullied, which most people were to some degree. So there's also a lot of, that's not just women that are afraid of men. Men themselves are afraid of other men. And then, of course, they're going to be afraid of that part of them that part of them that's inside them.
And a question come to me is, for you personally, how did that show up, that like being scared of men, that not being in the presence of men and not feeling like enough?
Well, fortunately, I was a pretty good athlete, so I was able to gain the approval of men in sports because I could always contribute to the team in some way. I didn't have to be the best, but I was always, good enough that I made a contribution, and therefore I was accepted. But I noticed it more when I was in Hollywood, when I would get around other actors who were men, because I didn't feel like I had anything to offer them. In fact, they were my competition. And I noticed that a lot of my friends were women. And that was a red flag for me. It's like, I had male friends, but it wasn't always close, right? And so I was more intimate with my female friends, like sharing my feelings, because I felt that they could receive me there, and they were more sensitive. So it took me a long time to actually clock, like, oh, I've got some shit with men. Like, I don't trust men, and I don't want to let them close. And then it's like, oh, why? It's like, oh, because I'm afraid I'm not going to measure up. I'm afraid they're going to reject me. I'm afraid I'm going to be excluded, and so I don't want to risk that. That pain that I imagine that I might feel. And so I just, I started going to men's groups. I started leading men's groups, and my, once I saw what was actually going on underneath men, like underneath the mask, and seeing that, oh, we're all the same, essentially, that we all have fears, we all have pain, we all have insecurities, we all have shame and doubt about ourselves and how we, show up in the world, and are we going to be enough? Can we measure up? That every guy is walking around with some version of that story. Then I alleviated myself from my own shame, and it kept me out of isolation, because then it's like, okay, we're all the same, and that there's nothing wrong with me.
Yeah. I'm smiling as you're saying, because I see with the groups that I run, the men always seem to feel that whatever they're dealing with, their pain, their struggle, is kind of unique to them. Like that no other man is experiencing it. And then when they sit in a circle and they start to share, and they hear that another man like doesn't feel good enough, or doesn't feel like he's capable, or doesn't want to open up, or had these certain struggles, they sit and they're like, oh, I'm not alone. And I have empathy for this man. I like care for him more now. I have compassion for him that he shared. And I didn't think anyone would have that experience for me. And it's this, I call it the kind of magic of men's groups, when the structure's really nice, where they open up and they share things about themselves, and they suddenly realize that it's like they're not this lone wolf on this journey of life with their own struggles they're carrying over their back. That it's like we are all struggling to some degree, and the struggle is so common in so many ways.
Yeah, that really is the magic of groups. And I started out in individual therapy. And as I said, I did many, many years of it. But it wasn't until I started working in groups where I really started to go deep. Because it's, I'm sitting across from my therapist. It's great. But, he's just one person, and his job is to be sympathetic and understanding. And also, I'm not really hearing his story the same way. I mean, he's telling me these things, but there's a part of me, like, do I believe it when he says, like, a lot of people feel this way, or this isn't, unusual. But then you get in a group of people, and even, my first groups were mixed groups. It wasn't just men. I did a lot of work with men and women. And it's like women are going through the same shit. Now, they have there's different issues that they have, and a different orientation, certainly. But at the end of the day, I was seeing myself reflected back in some, 55-year-old woman from Wyoming. And you're like, how is it that I'm relating to her? Like, we on the surface have nothing in common. And yet I'm watching her work through her issues, and I'm moved by it. I'm crying because it touches something inside me. And so, even larger than just the men, it's just like we all share this collective humanity. We're all the same underneath. And what's that quote by Gibran, like, if everybody were to sit in a circle and confess their sins, everybody would laugh at the lack of originality. It's so great. It's like your shit is not special. Like, everybody's got their shit, and it's such a relief, as you said, to know that. It's like, oh, I'm not alone with it. It's not special. I'm not unique. It's just, this is just part of what it means to be human.
Yeah. I always go into like these group work, and you always think, I always wish someone would give people like a sign that would be like, that would show that this is my special, individual, unique brokenness. So they can like put it up when they start speaking. And then it would show they start talking about it like, oh, my dad wasn't there. He was emotionally distant, like blah, blah, blah. And then see everyone else in the group put up their same stick and be like, oh man, it's really, I can't put the stick. I need to put the stick down now. Just so we really had like almost a comical way to kind of feel it in the moment.
I love that. Yeah.
You mentioned rationalization. Like, I'm gonna hop into one of the things that whenever I hear you say rationalization at the moment, I think of your kind of really well-known interview with Andrew Tate, because when I watched this interview, in many ways, I felt really inspired by the interview. Not just like, first of all, I want to start with you, like the way in which you just kind of hold yourself in it, never really getting sucked into his like opinions about the world, women and so forth, just like being with him, present with him. And if he kind of rants on to something and you're like, I don't want to go there, you just ask him a new question. So I just felt like as a coach, to see a therapist like work so skillfully outside of their emotional kind of personal emotional triggers was just like really, like, it was like watching art in so many ways. And I've sent it to so many friends. And one of the things I really took from it is he called it self-delusion at one point. His paradigm of self-delusion, which is such a rational way in which he sees the world, like to be successful in the metrics that he has. And I guess, where do you see that's lacking in many ways in a lot of men today? Like that ability to kind of have that self-delusion that can lead them in a meaningful direction?
It's a great question because, Andrew really made a compelling case for the power of rationalization. Essentially, I have this mental model that I am strong and powerful and capable. And because I believe that, it is so. And it's like, fair enough, and I guess, the issue in which I tried to point out to him what's like, yes, and it is a compensation, and he said that, well, maybe this is cope. And it's like, yeah, it definitely is cope. But then his argument is, well, if it's cope that works to get me what I want, then really what's the problem? And so, obviously I have a different perspective on that. But there is like a lot of value and utility in the things that he says. I was very persuaded by him, this concept of what's useful is more important than what's true, which I got off a friend of mine named Jesse Elder, who's a brilliant coach, men's coach, business coach. He's just a great guy. And that it is important to have powerful mental models. You've heard Jordan Peterson say this: don't indulge thoughts that make you feel weak. I think that's true. The issue is that we become very attached to those thoughts, those negative thoughts, those negative identifications, because we can use it as an excuse to explain why we're not getting what we want in life. And on a deeper level, it's really just a way to avoid feeling our pain, or really avoid taking responsibility for our lives. And so it's, the way that I think about it, it's twofold. Like, I do this course, Emotional Mastery. And at the beginning, we're really, going into people's childhoods and trying to help them understand like their emotional issues and the defenses that they created and the mask that they developed and what's underneath it, the false beliefs and all the disempowering ideas and images that they have about themselves in the world. And then at a certain point, you have to start to reprogram, essentially. And it's like you have to tell yourself a new story about yourself. And the good news is that you get to be deliberate about it. Like you can choose on some level, like who it is that you want to become. And I think it's most effective when the beliefs you choose feel connected to your essence, because I do believe that we all have our own individual essence, and we're here to give something that's unique and specific to us. So you want it to be integrated with that part of yourself, and not try to be something other than you're not. But it's like to tell yourself a more empowering story, and reframe, and look at where you have negative beliefs, and sometimes they're really subtle. Like we don't even know that we think that. We're not aware that we're making that manifest in our lives because we have this unconscious belief, and because we have this belief, we're making decisions or we're showing up in a way energetically that's causing a reaction to the people around us or in the world that is prohibiting us from getting what we want. And so it's not always an easy thing to see, but once you see it, it's like, okay, let me take control of my mind here and let me focus on empowering thoughts and beliefs that are going to get me better results in the world. But that also comes with you have to overcome your shame first. You really have to be able to liberate your shame before you can, start implementing this new, more empowering program, whether it's through affirmations or just reminding yourself every day of who you really are, like at your core, like, that you're fucking powerful. You can get shit done. And once you believe that, you start acting in accordance with those beliefs, and that you don't have to succumb to your fear, right? You can be afraid. I'm always afraid. Anytime I'm trying something new or wanting to expand my business or going to Romania to interview Andrew Tate, of course I'm fucking afraid. I'm nervous, but it's just like I let it be there. It's like, and I don't let it define the situation. I don't tell myself a story about what that fear means. Like, oh, I'm not going to be able to show up in a good way. I'm going to forget what I'm thinking about. Like, I don't let my fear define my reality. And I think that's it's like going back to John Wayne. It's like, it's okay to, just because you're afraid, you still got to get on the horse and go do what you got to do. Right. But we're all afraid. It's normal. You should be afraid. It's natural.
Yeah. Yeah. And just to hop back to the interview, it's something I saw you do repeatedly. It's like bringing Andrew to what he was afraid of. And I thought it was just like this really, I could just see these aha moments occurring in him as he was speaking to you, of like venturing into these parts of himself that he'd never really been to. And I found it really fascinating for someone who claims to know himself so well to sit in front of somebody for the first time and the second time and be taken to these new aspects of himself. And you asked him a really powerful question at one point. It's like, do you have people around you who reflect back to you? Because I see this as something that a lot of men, I do some of this stuff in some of the men's groups I run where like we do feedback, like there's a problem you have, here's the problem. And people just be like, what I feel in you is you maybe are just looking at this from not wrong direction, but a direction not useful, and blah, 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 because we're scared of feedback. And I thought it's fascinating when you were like, so do you get kind of honest feedback you can trust? And he said, I get loads of feedback and then basically I throw most of it away because it's just like, I just need to do what I need to do. But it's just interesting to see the number of times the like rationalization and also like the uncomfortability with expressing kind of fear that came, But between the two that I've watched when you interview him online and in person, there's like a shift. It's almost like he's more able to accept his fear once he'd been into prison. And he'd like been to this very dark place and had to maybe...
It's hard to admit. It's ridiculous to admit that you weren't afraid in prison. And I wasn't going to let him off the hook. It's like, bro, come on, I don't care how fucking tough you are. You're amazing in prison. You're afraid. Fuck off. And of course he had to admit it. And it was a relief when he did it, I think, for himself and for the audience watching. I mean, the problem with Andrew, it's not a problem. It's just, he like I said, he's got a strong mental model and he sticks to it and it works for him. And I kept calling him out in his rationalization because he was rationalizing. And all I was trying to do through the interview is point out the inconsistencies in his logic. It's hard to do that if you live in his frame, right? And I never allowed his frame to dominate the conversation. I kept bringing it back to my frame, and I had to do that in a way that was persuasive and gentle, and then also I had to affirm a lot of the things that he was saying, and I wasn't doing that out of manipulation. I actually was like, I agreed. Yeah, that makes sense to me. What you're saying absolutely makes sense to me. But the thing that I'll say about that interview also is that he was willing to surrender to my frame, like. He was vulnerable. Like, to be honest with you, there's not a lot of people that I feel like I could interview that would be willing to actually go there the way that he did. Now, people could say, well, he was in denial of this, that, and the other thing. I was like, well, but there's a lot of uncomfortable moments. There's a lot of moments that he admits that I'm right. There's a lot of moments that he acknowledges that maybe this is cope for me. And then at the end, he really let himself down and came all the way present. And I was right there, and I saw his eyes, and I saw the vulnerability, and I saw more of him come through, and it was beautiful. And I always, say to people, if that was like the first therapy session that I had with a client, I would consider it wildly successful. And so I have a lot of admiration for Andrew, for his willingness to sit down and do that interview. And he's the one who asked for it, which is also interesting. After our first one, he wanted to do it again. And so that shows me that there's a degree of awareness that he knows that he doesn't know certain things about himself, and that he was willing to find out live, recorded, and then he promoted the fuck out of it. So it's like, good for him. Good on him. I mean, and just what I said to him, it's like, dude, you're putting yourself out there. You never stop fucking talking. You never stop sharing your opinion. And that's vulnerable and I think that's part of the reason so many people hate him and why they hate Trump, because they don't give a shit. They just say whatever the fuck they want. And you may not agree with what it is they're saying, but who among us doesn't want to have the permission to just say out whatever the fuck we want and let the world deal with it? So I admire the guy. I think, what again, I understand all the criticism and all of that stuff, but at the end of the day, I'm glad he's here and I'm glad he's doing what he's doing. I think it's a net positive. Personally, that's what I feel. And even in the place where he's got a shadow, okay, well, then we get to see his shadow, but that's out on full display as well. He's not hiding anything. So, I like Andrew. Obviously, I have a bias because, I sat with him in that way. And also when I'm sitting with somebody in that context, I'm looking at them in a different way. I'm just like looking through the facade, and all I see is like the little boy. So that's what I'm in relationship with. So when I see all the bluster and the aggression and all the things he's saying, like all I see is this playful little boy. And I understand that other people don't see that. But that's what I see. And so that's what I'm holding, and which is why I think I have a lot more compassion for him than maybe a lot of other people do.
And I think the interview made anyone that watched that would have more compassion for him as a human being. Like, I think I've been into a lot of schools and talked to young boys, and that's probably the side of his message that I think is like not one of the sides that's really problematic, is that young boys take everything he says as gospel, like everything he says. Because he says a good number of good things, like 80% of what he's saying is useful and so forth. And there's just like some parts of his message that are really harmful. And the young boys are like taking this on and saying it to their teachers, right? Like saying it to the women in their lives, their mothers and so forth. So super kind of problematic. But I also think there's another mechanism in society where we project onto him the parts of ourselves that we disown, or even the parts of ourselves that we would love to kind of like, even if it's just 1% of our lives, like embody a little bit more. And it's easy to kind of project onto someone else. It's like Donald Trump as well. Like, I'm not a huge fan of either of them, but you can look at them and go, in what ways would I like to be more like these men? In what ways? Not 100%, but like what traits and not necessarily values, traits that they embody that I like a little bit more in my life. Like, that I don't give a fuck. I'm going to say what I really think. I'm going to go after what I really want. I'm going to have absolute discipline, like to create my life as the way I want. Like a lot of us want more of that, but because we can't do that for ourselves, it's easy to look at people like Donald Trump and even wealthy people and billionaires and just demonize them because, we can't have the thing we really want.
Well, yeah, exactly. I think that's exactly right. There's so much projected onto people like that, and their ability to hold that projection, that transference. That's what's amazing to me. I mean, that's what I'm blown away by with Trump. I mean, because as a therapist, as a facilitator, like I know that when I'm in the room working with people in a deep emotional way, everybody's in transference with me. Unconsciously, I'm everybody's dad. And so when people are relating to me, they're not really aware of that, but they're relating to me from that place. And it's important for me to hold that transference, right? So that I'm in reality of what's actually going on. And that transference can be both positive and negative. It's like I can be the good dad or sometimes I'm the bad dad. People are angry at me. They're disappointed. They're screaming at me like, you fucked all this up. And it's important that I don't take any of it personally. And that was the skill that I had to learn. And I spent a lot of time, practicing it and developing it. And so then when I see somebody like Trump or Tate, and there's just this mass negative transference that's placed on them. And then, they just keep showing up every day, cracking jokes. They keep going. And it's kind of like, wow, I wish I was more like that. Like, I wish I was more immune to the criticism, to the judgments, to the people who are attacking me. Like, it just seems to bounce off them like Teflon. And I challenged Andrew there. I'm like, that shit doesn't bother you? He's like, no, they're losers. What do I give a shit what losers think? Now, that's a kind of a defense. He's kind of dehumanizing them. But I actually believed him that it's like, it doesn't land. Like, it doesn't really get to him. And I was like, man, I'd like more of that. I'd like to be able to like hold on to myself in the face of judgment and criticism, because I have some, obviously what I just said, it's like, I think Andrew Tate's a net positive. There's a lot of people out there, maybe yourself, maybe people in the audience who are like, no, that's fucking wrong. And I've been demonized for doing the interview, right? Lots of people come at me and I've had to learn over time to just, understand it for what it is and not take it on and not take it personally, which makes me a much more powerful person in the world. So I think there's like, that's also a thing that I admire in both of those people, in all leaders in general, because it's not an easy thing to put yourself out there all the way and then stand in the face of all the attacks.
Yeah. And I think that's when it comes to men and leadership, like any sort of leadership, whether that's the self-leadership or leadership of a group or community, that's the thing that stops us, right? Like the fear of judgment is, I don't know, it's not quite up there with maybe men's like number one fear, but it's a pretty close second, like fear of judgment.
Well, I think it's inherent, right? Like we're tribal, and we don't want to get kicked out of the tribe, because if we're kicked out of the tribe, it's hard for us to survive. So there is an evolutionary instinct to stay connected to the tribe, which means, going along and being nice. And maybe you have this thought, but I'm not going to say it because I don't want people mad at me, because at the deepest level, that's a threat to my existence or my livelihood. And again, I've suffered that, and I just trusted, like, I made the decisions, like, am I going to betray myself to be seen as good in the eyes of others, or am I going to be authentic to myself and say what I feel, say what I mean, even if sometimes what I'm saying, maybe I'm distorted, like maybe I'm not getting it entirely right. That's okay. But like, this is how I feel right now. And so I want to express it and I want to feel free to express it. And, I spent a long time betraying myself. That's what I did in Hollywood. I just, I showed up in the way that people wanted me to show up. I was the nice guy. I was, putting on a mask, and it just got to the point where it was intolerable. And I was just filled with anger and resentment. And of course, I blamed Hollywood. I blamed the show that I was on, or the writers, or the director, or the other actors, whatever it was. Like, it was their fault. Like they were the ones responsible for me not being able to express myself fully. And if only they understood me, or they were smarter, or they were deeper, there would be space for me to come out. And then I realized, like, no, that's just my defense. It's like, if I have to risk coming out, I have to risk not betraying myself. I have to risk being true to myself and saying what I think and what I feel, and trusting that there's something good on the other side of that. And then ultimately, that is what people respond to. They respond to authenticity, and they respond to the boldness of standing up and saying what you think. Even if in the short term they disagree with what you're saying, over the long term, they can't help but admire the courage. That's the kind of the mindset that shift that I made. It's like, no, I'm demonstrating courage, and that'll give other people permission to be more courageous. And even if I'm messy, or it's okay. Even if my shadow comes out, it's okay. Like I have to refine it. I have to say it out and get the response and see, oh, maybe I'm off there, or maybe going to refine this message here. But I can only do that if I'm actually expressing myself and testing to see the response it gets. And that's what I've been willing to do over time. Now I feel a lot. I mean, I don't do it perfectly, but I feel a lot more free to just say what I want when I want. And so then that eliminates the anxiety, right? Because I'm no longer worried about what other people think of me, and I'm not hiding anything, right? And because when you're hiding something, if I'm in a conversation with you and I'm hiding something, I'm not all the way there. I'm not really present with you. And I'm afraid unconsciously, it's like, is this person going to find out about me? Are they going to find out what I really think? Are they going to find out about my secret shame? And that's in the field, right? And so it makes it hard to connect. And so it ultimately, it's like you can't have connection with other people unless you're truly connected to yourself. And the only way you can be connected to yourself is to speak what's true for you. And that's true also in my relationship. The more honest we are with each other, even if that truth we are expressing may cause the other person some hurt, right? It's worth it because ultimately it brings us into closer connection.
Mm. It clears the field, truth clears the field, but also that when we're, as you were saying there, if I'm worrying about you seeing me, part of my energy is distracted from being with you. It's off in the corner looking, or behind me, the thing I don't want you to see, postulating and trying to make sure you can't see it. And you feel that if you're attuned to that. I hope you don't, I'm sitting here doing this movement, trying to hide the stuff.
Yeah.
But you're kind of, if you're attuned, you're sitting there thinking, something's really off here, but I'm staying with this. And I think this is something that we don't learn. We don't learn that there's this distraction, this hiding we're constantly doing, and that it actually affects our connections. And I do wonder sometimes, well, I don't wonder, I kind of see it, that this is why not just men feel lonely, but relationships and dating, this whole kind of mechanism for us coming together and having deep connection feels very broken, because we're all too much in this postulation, this hiding, this avoiding saying the thing we want to say, or avoiding being the person who we are at our essence in this protection strategy.
I think that's exactly right. The therapist told me once, lonely, because I was like, I feel lonely. And he said, lonely is lonely for yourself. I was like, what? What does that mean? And then he said it again slower, lonely is lonely for yourself, meaning that in the place where the parts of myself that I've cut off, that are disowned, that are hiding, those parts of me are lonely. Mm. Because I've relegated them to the shadow. And that reframe was so powerful. So my loneliness is not actually about connection with other people. It's actually about connection to myself. And I remember watching The White Lotus, I think it was season 1, and there was a character arc where a young couple, they just gotten married, and the woman confessed, by the end of the show that she was lonely in the relationship, and she was sort of blaming him for it. And I think a lot of the audience, because he was kind of a dick, was on her side. If this guy was more sensitive, but I had a different perspective on it, and I made a video about it. That's why I'm talking about it. I thought, well, no, she's not being honest with him. She's not revealing herself to him. So she's in this sense responsible for her loneliness, because she's holding something back. Now she's afraid to do that, I'm sure because of things that happened to her childhood, but it's actually not his fault, right? We all have to take responsibility for that. And as I said earlier, make we get to know these disowned parts of ourselves and bring them back and make peace with them and forgive anything that needs to be forgiven, your loneliness will go away, because it's so much easier to connect with other people because you're not hiding anything. You're just there. And then that actually gives them permission to open up more of themselves. It's really that. And, but yes, a lot of men are lonely. And yes, coming together, as you said, I think it is the solution. But it's because, as you said earlier, it's like because we see ourselves in the other man, we see ourselves reflected back. We see we're not alone in our struggles, and so then we can reintegrate and reconnect to all these kind of lost parts of ourselves. So it's an interesting. I mean, the psyche is so interesting. I think that message, which is a kind of really foundationally spiritual message, is that like everything is one. There is only one. And in some sense, there is nothing outside yourself. Like everything you're seeing is a projection, and your reactions to what's happening is just a mirror for you. And we blame and we judge and we criticize and we point fingers, but really everything, including Trump and Tate, they're mirrors for us in some way. So that, like our transference, our projections, both positive and negative towards people like that, it's really just about ourselves. When I have an issue with my wife, and maybe I'm right in pointing to something saying, hey, you're being this way, or you're doing something, but it's like 100% that whatever it is that I'm upset about, that what she's doing, I'm also doing. Or there's some part of me that's like unexpressed and is agitated by that thing, because the question is what is it in me that's so triggered by that? What is it in me that's upset by that? And so can I keep bringing it back? And it's not making yourself a victim, because people will, this is victim blaming. That's not what it is. It's just taking responsibility for how you are existing in the world, how you're seeing the world, the impacts that you're having in the world, what you're getting and not getting in the world, all of your frustrations, that ultimately it always comes back to you. And if you're willing to confront yourself there, that is the path, the road to freedom. It's the only path to freedom, as I see it.
Yeah. Getting other people in your life to change and your partner to change and the world to change is, it's a good, feels like a good moral undertaking. But if you do it at the expense of just, forgetting that there's a deep responsibility of ourselves, like individually, each one of us looking at ourselves, and this kind of constant cycle. Oh, I see something outside me I don't like. What's going on with me? What's going on here with me? Like, then we're just full of kind of blame. And, we live in a world where I think blame is really incredibly acceptable to blame other people for everything in your life.
I love to blame other people. I mean, it feels good, like the negative pleasure that you get, right? And I let myself do it. Like I let myself have my reactions, but I try to be conscious of it and go, okay, like I notice I'm having a reaction, like fuck them, fuck her, whatever it is. And then I come back. Well, what is this for me? Why am I reacting in this way? Why does this upset me so much? Why can't I stop paying attention to this? Like what's my pain? What's my fear? What's my resentment? Like where am I not taking ownership of something inside me? That's what I'm trying to teach people, right? And we all get caught in it. It's fine. It's like nobody's perfect, but it's like, can I bring it back to myself? Like, how quickly can I bring it back to myself? How quickly can I take responsibility? It's just a much more empowering way to live, because otherwise you're just, your emotional state is always in reaction to or the effect of external events.
Mm-hmm. It's like the meditation of life, bringing it back, constantly bringing it back to to you, not from a kind of self-absorbed point of view, but actually from a service and contribution to creating a better life and creating better relationships.
That's right.
Well, David, I've realized that time, it always runs away so quickly, and this has been such a fascinating conversation of weaving between all these different areas. I have this habit, I always write out a bunch of questions I want to ask people, and I realized that I think I asked you 2 of them, which is, almost a new record for me because we just kind of flowed with the conversation. Want to say a huge thank you to you for just sharing so much of you and your experience. And also, where can the listeners find more of you, where they can hear more of your wonderful wisdom?
DavidSutcliffe.com. That's my website. It's all there. You can find my links to my YouTube and my Instagram and different programs that I'm running. I'm getting set to launch a new program that is kind of what we talked about earlier around the nice guy, because it's one, because I relate to it so strongly, and two, because it's so prevalent in the culture, and really trying to teach men how to stand up for themselves in relationship, how to lead, how to bring their masculine authority, for them, for their woman, for their children. So that'll be launching soon. But it's if you go to my website, davidsutcliffe.com, get on my email list, and I got lots of different things that I'm doing. So thank you.
No, thank you, man. Thank you. It's been such a pleasure to talk to you today. Yeah. And listeners, if you've enjoyed this, I'm sure there is somebody in your life, there's probably a man in your life that could really do with listening to this conversation. And if only they listen to the beginning where David talks about having everything, this Hollywood life, the money, and not being happy. Because I know there's a lot of guys that believe if they just had fame and they just had money, that they would be joyful and everything would be perfect. And life isn't that simple, right? It's like, unless you're Andrew Tate, who he really believes that is as simple as life is. So share it with somebody, share it with a man out there in your life, being good for him, good for us as well. And I'll say thank you for listening, and ciao, ciao.